The first thing we're going to talk about is the model of a Christian marriage. God is the author of marriage. We have to remember that. God created marriage. It wasn't Julius Caesar. It wasn't Barack Obama. They didn't create it. God created marriage. He created us with a longing and a loving for each other. And it's so wonderful to think that God created this beautiful thing between a man and a woman, and He wanted it for our enjoyment. One of the things in our society is that we don't talk a lot about what it takes to have a successful marriage. And it's so important. We have to look at the quality of the relationship to have a successful marriage. Sadly, we don't spend a lot of time in our society talking about marriage and what it takes to have a successful marriage. Hopefully in the context of this weekend, you'll be able to get some tools to assist you in establishing a quality relationship. Why is it that all of you or most of you are getting married in the church? Why not jump in a plane, fly down to Vegas, get a big stretch limo with a nice hot tub in it and a stock bar, and drive to one of those drive-by chapels, I do, and go party in Vegas? Why are you getting married in the church? What's so important about that? Sometimes it's one of those things we do, but we think, well, yeah, good question. Why am I doing that? We're inviting God to be a part of our relationship. Marriage is not just two people. When you get married in the church, you're making an invitation to God and Jesus to be a part of your relationship, and that's so important. We receive many graces from the sacrament of marriage. Many of them we see and understand, and we're so thankful for, and many we will understand better after we die. But the graces we receive help us to sustain us in our marital relationship, and that's so important. So if you look at the model of a Christian marriage, you have a triangle here between God, husband, and wife. And you can see on this that there's equal distance between the three. When the distance between both of them changes, the relationship with God changes. So if you're feeling really close, husband and wife are feeling really close to one another, then you're probably feeling a lot closer to God and feeling His love and acceptance. If there's conflict and tension in the relationship, then chances are that you're going to feel you're kind of alone and God is further away from you. The beauty of the Christian marriage is that you're never alone, and God is always there to help you. And I know that sounds maybe a little bit theoretical, but it really works in our lives, in our marriage. So to give you an example, God being present. Lord, Elaine's driving me nuts. Help me to have patience. Help me to have understanding. Lord, I'm not the person you called me to be. Help me not to be so selfish. Help me to put my wonderful spouse first. If there's conflict in our relationship, she'll pray that there'll be an appropriate time that we could discuss the issues and resolve them. She often does that. So it's not a hypothetical or theoretical thing. God is present in your marriage, and you're asking God to be a part of your marriage ceremony, to be included and to walk with you in your marital relationships. So if you're feeling isolated and you're feeling distant from each other, God is always there and is present to be with you. I just want to read from the scripture. It's from Ecclesiastes 4. And just bear with me, it's not very long, just a couple lines. Happier two than one alone, for their work brings a higher salary. And when one falls, the other lifts up his companion. Unfortunate he who is alone and has no one to lift him up. Moreover, it's warmer with two in bed. How can one alone be warm? I like that line. One person may be overcome by an aggressor, but two can easily oppose him, but a triple-stranded thread is not easily broken. And a triple-stranded thread is basically husband, wife, and God as a team working together. It's harder to bring an end to that marriage when you're all together. So that's part of it. You know, it's so important to include God as part of your relationship. And I'm just going to tell you this story that happened to me. This happened to me about 15 years ago. Anybody hear of Melissa's running race? Anybody hear of Melissa's? It's a race, 10K in Banff. Anyways, I was enrolled in this race, and I know I probably look like a good runner, but I'm not. I'm a plodder. And I'm running, and part of the race goes through the Banff Springs golf course. Beautiful place. There was about 3,500 people in this race. And I love to golf, and I'm running through the golf course. There's all these people ahead of us, and I say to the Lord, just like I said, I'll talk to the Lord. I say, Lord, help me to find a golf ball. So I'm running, and all these people ahead of me, I see a golf ball. I pick up the golf ball. Thank you, Lord. I put it in my pocket. I keep running. I run another 15 minutes. I find a pink golf ball. Keep in mind, there's over 2,000, 3,000 people ahead of me running the same paths. I find a pink ball. Lord, I don't play golf with a pink ball. And I distinctly heard the Lord say, in my heart, that's for Elaine. So I put the other golf ball, I got one in each pocket, I'm running, and you know, I got to pull up my pants because my pants are starting to fall from the golf balls. I find another golf ball, and I say, okay, Lord, I am so confused. What is this? Another golf ball. And clearly written on my heart was, that represents me. I am a part of your relationship with Elaine. I want to be present with you guys. That was really moving, and to think that, you know, 10 years later I would be talking about this, but I had an actual real-life experience with this model of a Christian marriage. You're on, dear.
Yep, the next section of the model of a Christian marriage, as you see in the middle, is the cross. Now, what does the cross signify? The cross is a sign of our Christian faith and our journey in a Christian marriage. And what does it mean to you? You see the crucifix here. What emotion do you have? What sensation do you have as you look at the cross, or when you're in church, when you're in Mass and you gaze at the cross? What feelings do you get when you gaze at the cross? Do you get feelings of thankfulness, like, oh, Lord, thank you for the wonderful spouse I have. Thank you for all of the blessings you give me. Thank you for the children I have. Thank you for my family. Or is it maybe help, like, Lord, help me, please. Like, help me be a better person. Help me to love more. Help me to be a better parent. Or maybe it's gratitude. It's like, wow, Jesus, you died on the cross for me and for my sins. That's awesome. You did it for me. You did it for all of mankind. You did it for everyone. That's awesome. So when you look at the cross, what does it mean to you? In a marriage, it means sacrifice. This resonates sacrifice, and that's what it is all about in a marriage. It's not about me. It's about the other person. What can I do to make my spouse a better person? How can I love my spouse better to make our relationship more fruitful? It says in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it says, pick up your cross and carry it. As a matter of fact, in Luke, it says, pick up your cross and carry it daily. I don't know if I like that a whole lot, but that's what it tells you. What is your cross? What is our cross? Sometimes he is my cross, and he's heavy. And sometimes I'm sure I'm his cross, and I'm probably a lot heavier. And sometimes your kids are your cross. Or maybe your work is your cross, but hey, you have to provide for your family. So we all have crosses. We all have all different kinds of crosses. So what I ask you is, what is your cross? What crosses are you carrying? We all carry crosses. What is your cross? Part of the cross is the sacrifice for your spouse, the sacrifice for the person you love, the sacrifice for the person you chose to be your beloved. Like, I mean, this could be for 60 years, right? And that's some of the crosses that we carry.
The base of the cross, you can see on the sheet there, is a commitment. A commitment that we want to include Jesus as a part of our relationship in a Christian marriage. And a commitment to make our marriage life-giving. We don't want to have a boring relationship. We don't want to just take each other for granted. We want to have laughter. We want to have joy. We want to have pleasure. We want to have a real life-fulfilling relationship. And it can be that way. It doesn't have to be boring and staid, where we slowly drift apart from one another. And one of the things that we do, Elaine and I do often, is that we'll just pray together, and we pray for our relationship, that God will strengthen us and help us in our journey and to use us in whatever capacity He wants to use us. So you're committed to one another. And you know, one of the most beautiful things in life is that somebody that knows you, knows your faults, knows your weaknesses, knows all your bad habits, knows your fears, and they still love you. Isn't that an awesome thing if you can have a spouse that's like that? And that's what Jesus is towards us. He knows our faults, He knows our weaknesses, but He loves us anyways. It doesn't matter if we sin, He loves us anyways. So it's important to imitate Christ in our relationship too. So we have to be committed to one another. I'm just going to read, if I can, about commitment. Elaine and I had the privilege of going to a marriage conference here a few years ago, and actually Bishop Henry was one of the presenters. And I just want to read a couple of lines. It's not long. Commitment and faithfulness demands more than having an extramarital affair. Sometimes sex produces a child, but the meaning of intercourse does not stop there. There's also a spiritual dimension. Intercourse is the central and recurrent act of prayer in the life of a couple. It reflects the Trinity in that two people are united through the third element of their love. They are in complete unity while remaining separate as persons. The giving and receiving of each other's bodies is also a reminder of the Eucharist. In sexual intercourse, the world sees merely a physical encounter. Seen through the eyes of faith, intercourse is a language of love, in which the couple give their whole being to each other, and in so doing, enter the very essence of the life of God, which is love. So isn't that a beautiful thing that in the act of our marital intimacy, in the act of sexual intercourse, our church is comparing it to the Eucharist. Too often we say, oh, the church is old-fashioned, they don't know what they're talking about, you know, they're so prudish. They're saying Eucharist and sexual intercourse are basically the same thing, because Christ died on the cross. He gave Himself totally to us, and He left that through His body and blood through the Eucharist. And that's what we do in the context of our marriage, is we give each other totally to one another, emotionally, physically, spiritually. So that's a beautiful thing. The arms of the cross. So the arms are outstretched. In many ways, the arms of the cross represent the most vulnerable part of Jesus. We grow when we're vulnerable. Have you ever had the experience, let me just take it into a work context. Maybe there's somebody at work that you find aloof, distant, kind of cold, doesn't say much, and you say, I don't think I like my colleague very much. And one day in the coffee shop, the person says to you, I kind of admire you, you know, I have a tough time talking to people and trusting people. When I was a kid, I was abused. And I've always been a little reticent to warm up to people and open up to people. And I know people have said to me I'm kind of aloof and distant, but that's what happened to me. How are you going to look at that person that you maybe didn't like very much? You're probably going to see him in a much different context than you did earlier. And that's what we're called to do in our marriage. We're called to be open and vulnerable with each other. You know, if you've had a bad day at work, you don't come home and take it out on your spouse. You come home and say, you know, honey, I had a lousy day. The boss dumped on me and, you know, I'm kind of down about it. Just give me some space, or just, can we talk about it? Whatever. So you're being open, and then if your character's not in line, at least your spouse, you give a heads up to your spouse. I had a friend that I ran into a couple of years ago, and his name was Jack, and I hadn't seen Jack for a few years, and I said, how's it going, Jack? And he said, you know, it's not going very good. I've got cancer. I had to quit work. I'm going for therapy, and I don't know if I'll ever get back to work, and I'm going through a really difficult time in my life. I said, that's terrible. He says, you know, it's funny, but my marriage, and he was married about 15 years at that point, he said, my marriage is the best it's ever been. I said, what are you talking about? He says, because of this experience, I was finally able to open up to my wife, to share who I really was, my fears and everything. And my marriage is so wonderful right now. And sometimes we have to do that. We have to be open and vulnerable with one another. The arms of the cross represent courage and consideration. We have to have the courage to step out and be vulnerable and deal with issues, yet you must have consideration of your partner. A lot of us don't want to deal with issues. Trust me, you're going to have issues that you're going to have to deal with in your relationship. And it's easy to sweep those under the rug, but eventually you're going to have to deal with them. You have to have the courage to say, I was wrong, or I am sorry. Don't answer the question, but how many of your parents actually were able to say to each other, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Honey, forgive me. I messed up. I'm sorry. How many parents could do that? How many of you can do that right now with your own spouse? And pride gets in the way so much in our relationship of being able to say some of those things. Pride is they say, is the root of all evil, but it's really something you have to look at. I know I grit my teeth when I have to say, Elaine, I messed up, you were right. You know, I have to grit my teeth, but it comes out slowly. but I try to work on that. We have to have the courage to not argue and be less demanding of our point of view. I had an aunt and uncle, and they argued about everything. They argued so much, it was always about who was right. And I don't know who said it over here. Happy wife, happy life. Thank you. And you have to have the courage to start again when things are not going well, and the consideration of your partner in all aspects of the journey. Sometimes your relationship is going to struggle, and it's so important that you start again. You don't say, well, let's just throw in the towel. You'll find out tomorrow. We talked about irreconcilable differences. Every couple has irreconcilable differences, and it's so important to work those through and to deal with those kinds of issues. So how do you do all this? You do this through listening and expressing. And there's a saying that it's not about finding the right person, it's being the right person. So in your relationship, it's so important to focus on yourself, and you can't change your partner. Change within the marriage comes from change within yourself. So that's an important point to remember. And as Elaine was talking about, marriage is not about you per se, it's about your relationship and the other person. And the best model of a marriage is Christ. He died on the cross for us. He sacrificed for us, and that's what we're called to do in our marriage. I want to tell you two quick stories about two guys that I knew. One of them had a long list of qualities he wanted in a lady. She had to be 5 this. She had to have this kind of eyes. She had to have this color of hair. She had to have this kind of a body. She had to have she had to have good employment. She had to dress like a fox. He had this long list of qualities he wanted in a marriage. The other guy had a long list of ladies he wanted to date, and he'd go out with them on a date. He wanted to get married, and he'd check them off each if they didn't find they were suitable marital partners. Both of those guys got married within 2 years. Guess what happened to them? Sorry? Divorced. They were both divorced within 2 years. And the reason was they thought marriage was about them. They didn't see it as it's about giving to the other person. It's about sacrifice. It's about loving. Love demands a sacrifice. So important to remember. Love demands a sacrifice on our part. And so we have to put the other person first. If you don't remember anything in this course, remember this. You have to put your spouse first. You're sacrificing for your spouse. And when both of you do it for each other, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. Just one more quick story too. We have this couple that we knew down in Arizona. Mary Jane loved to camp. She loved to hike. And those were her two passions. Sonny did that, and he did it happily for the 2 years they were dating. The day after they got married, he took out a golf membership and went golfing every day. She said, "Can we go camping?" "I don't like camping. I don't want to do that." They were divorced within a year and a half. Again, it's about the other person. It's not about you. It's not finding the best cook so they can take care of me. My dad, I'll tell you a quick story about my dad. He's been married 3 times, unfortunately, and the last time I asked him how his marriage was, he said, "Oh, Kunrad, yeah, pretty good. Yeah, she's a good cook, and she sews my buttons and does my ironing and my washing. She's a good wife." Well, my dad still hasn't got it yet, what it is about marriage. You have to sacrifice for the other person. Okay, the last part of the model of a Christian marriage is the circle, and that's the church and community. Does anybody really know what the role of a witness is at the marriage? The traditional role is that when you go to a wedding, you're witnessing the vows, the commitment that this couple makes to each other. And you're there as a witness. So if they struggle in their relationship, the real role of the witness is to, in a loving way, challenge them and try to help them in their struggles. If the guy is out drinking every night and quits his job and starts running around, you're called as a friend and as somebody that witnessed that relationship to go to that person in a loving way to try to get them on track, to do what you can do to help them. And within the context of a Christian marriage, as we talked about, it's not just about us. It's about giving back to the world as well, whether that's through being a Boy Scout leader, a hockey coach, teaching brownies, whatever, being a minister at your church. It's about giving back in your community. And that's so important to do. And you'll find that that strengthens your relationship as well. The studies have shown that more couples today are more isolated from the community than ever before. I don't know how true that is, but it's something to think about. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more tomorrow afternoon. That's the presentation on the model of a Christian marriage. And what I'd like you to do just on a blank piece of paper, just answer this question. As a result of the presentation on the model of a Christian marriage, what can I do to enhance our relationship? What can I do to enhance our relationship? Just write it down on a piece of paper there and then share it with one another. And after that, when you're finished, we're going to take a 5-10 minute break.